On the early morning of March the 6th, 1945, precisely at 7:42, a young soldier named Corporal Clarence Smooyer found himself crouched tightly inside the confined space of the turret of an M26 Pershing tank. This colossal armored vehicle, a symbol of American technological advancement during the closing months of World War II, was stationed amidst the chaotic, debris-strewn streets of Cologne, a city ravaged by relentless bombing and fierce fighting. From his vantage point, Smooyer kept a keen lookout, intently watching a German Panther tank crew as they carefully rotated their formidable 75mm gun toward an intersection just a short distance away, where two American Sherman tanks had recently come to a halt. At that time, Smooyer was barely 21 years old, hardly old enough to grasp the full weight of the battle raging around him. His military service had spanned almost 7 months, during which he had fought across the blood-soaked landscapes of France and Germany. Throughout this period, he had managed to destroy 5 enemy tanks, a testament to his skill and bravery. Now, in this critical moment, the German Panther, a powerful and heavily armed tank, fired 2 shots in quick succession, each round penetrating the armor of the lead Sherman with deadly precision. Both projectiles struck within inches of each other, punching through the Sherman's gun shield, which was designed to guard against such attacks, but was no match for the Panther's formidable firepower. The result was immediate and devastating. 3 American crewmen were killed instantly as the deadly rounds tore through flesh, metal, and machinery. The tank's commander, in a desperate attempt to escape, tried to bail out but was struck by tragedy. His left leg was blown off below the knee, rendering him unable to flee. Clarence Smooyer had grown up in Duel, a small town nestled within the coal-rich regions of Pennsylvania, where his father worked tirelessly in the mines, extracting black gold from the earth to sustain their community. His childhood had been marked by simplicity. He had never been involved in a fist fight, and his experience with hunting was limited to a single outing for rabbits, which left him feeling sick and unsettled afterward. Now, faced with the horrifying reality of war, he sat behind the sight of a weapon capable of unleashing destruction on a scale he had scarcely imagined. He was controlling the gun of America's most powerful tank, watching thick black smoke billow from a nearby Sherman crew compartment, where the crew members were fighting for their lives just 2 streets away. By this point in the war, the United States Army had suffered the loss of thousands of Sherman tanks, vehicles that were considered the backbone of American armored strength. These losses came at the hands of German artillery, anti-tank guns, and other formidable weapons. The Panther, with its sleek yet imposing design, was notably heavier, by approximately 10 tons, than the Sherman it had just disabled. Even more formidable was the Tiger tank, which weighed even more and posed a significant threat on the battlefield. German 75mm and especially 88mm guns had proven capable of piercing the armor of American Shermans at ranges from which the American 75mm rounds simply ricocheted off the steel surfaces of German tanks. During the intense Battle of the Bulge, which had taken place only 3 months prior, entire American tank battalions have been decimated. The losses in that engagement were staggering. Entire companies lost half their vehicles in a single encounter, a testament to how dangerous and demanding armored warfare had become. The grim statistics told a clear story about the danger faced by American tank crews. When a Sherman was struck in combat, seconds often determined life or death, as crews had to make rapid decisions to escape before their ammunition, stored within the tank, heated up and detonated, turning the 55 tons of steel into a deadly crematorium. The threat had been evident ever since the Normandy landings, yet the United States Army's response had been delayed for nearly 3 years. The prevailing belief among Army ground forces, led by Lieutenant General Leslie McNair, was that the Sherman tank was sufficient for their needs. They insisted that it was an adequate, even a capable vehicle for wartime combat, and that the problem of armored threat could be handled by specialized tank destroyers. This doctrine held that tanks primarily supported infantry units and should avoid engaging enemy tanks directly unless absolutely necessary, whereas German forces often adopted a contrasting approach, emphasizing direct tank-on-tank confrontation. This divergence between American and German military strategies reflected the realities confronted by each side in the battlefield. The U.S. military's official stance was that the Sherman, with its reliable design, was good enough. Why undertake the costly and complex process of building a heavier, more heavily armored tank where the existing models worked well in North Africa? The logic was pragmatic. Why fix what wasn't broken? However, this mindset proved dangerously short-sighted as the war intensified. The inability to address the mounting threats became painfully obvious when American tank crews suffered catastrophic losses during the Battle of the Bulge and other engagements. The origins of the problem traced back to 1942 when the U.S. Army's Ordnance Department initiated the program to develop a heavily armed and armored tank intended to match or surpass the formidable German vehicles. This effort produced several prototypes in the T-26 series, each successive version featuring increased armor, more powerful guns, and refined suspensions designed to improve mobility and survivability. Yet, with each iteration, the tank became heavier and more complex, making it more difficult and expensive to produce and maintain. Despite these challenges, the military leadership under McNair dismissed these prototypes, favoring their established tactics and perceived battlefield successes. They argued that the Sherman had performed adequately in North Africa, so why undertake the costly and uncertain process of creating a new, heavier tank? Their motto appeared to be, "If it ain't broke, don't fix it." As the war progressed, this conservative approach, rooted in complacency and a reluctance to innovate, proved perilous for American tank crews. By 1944, the consequences of this neglect were painfully clear. The Battle of the Bulge shattered any illusions about the adequacy of American armored vehicles. Over the course of 2 weeks in December of that year, German forces, comprising roughly 400 tanks, including both Panther tanks and heavily armored Tiger IIs, crashed into American lines with overwhelming force. American Sherman crews fought valiantly, displaying remarkable courage, but suffering staggering losses. Many were killed in action, their tanks destroyed or captured. The battlefield realities made it clear that the Sherman, in its existing form, was no longer sufficient to face the highly fortified German tanks and the deadly anti-tank weapons they wielded. In the wake of the Ardennes offensive, the necessity for heavier, more capable tanks was undeniable. Early the following year, in January of 1945, the first 26 E3 tanks, later designated as the M26 Pershing, arrived at the Belgian port of Antwerp. These new tanks represented a significant leap forward in American tank design, featuring heavier armor, a more powerful gun, and improved fire control. General Omar Bradley, commanding the American forces in Europe, decided to distribute this new equipment evenly between 2 veteran divisions, sending 10 tanks to the 3rd Armored Division and 10 to the 9th Armored Division. By the 17th of February, the tanks reached a maintenance depot near Aachen, in Germany, where division commanders assigned their best crews for critical training. Although the Pershing shared some control features with the Sherman, such as similar operational controls, the most noticeable difference was its transmission system, which was designed to accommodate the more demanding powertrain and weight of the new tank. The introduction of the M26 Pershing marked a decisive step toward overcoming the limitations of earlier American tanks, providing a more formidable tool that could stand up to the most advanced German armor on the battlefield. In the early hours of that fateful day, each member of the crew carefully fired a total of 28 rounds, a deliberate series of test shots meant to help them become intimately familiar with the formidable weapon they now operated, the 120mm main gun mounted on their tank. The explosion of each round was more than just a loud bang. It produced a more prominent flash of light, illuminating the smoky dawn sky with a sudden, blinding brilliance. The recoil, as the heavy projectile was propelled forward, was notably more powerful, making the entire vehicle jerk slightly with each shot, a reminder of the raw power contained within. The cacophony of noise was relentless, Even through the thick intercom headset that protected their ears, the roaring blast seemed to make their heads ring painfully, echoing in their minds long after the shots had been fired. Among these testers was Smooyer, who couldn't help but recall his very first experience firing the new weapon. That initial shot, though routine in procedure, left an indelible impression on him. The target that day had been a humble farmhouse, distant downrange by a staggering distance of 12,200 yards, a truly vast stretch of open terrain that challenged their skill and courage. Standing 20 feet behind the tank, Major General Maurice Rose, the distinguished commander of the 3rd Armored Division, watched intently alongside his staff. Rose had handpicked the target, the solitary chimney of the farmhouse, and had given clear instructions to Smooyer to aim precisely. Holding the reticle steady, Smooyer pulled the trigger with a sense of focused determination. In that instant, the powerful muzzle blast struck the air, unleashing a loud thunder that reverberated across the landscape. The shockwave was so intense that it threw Rose and every officer standing nearby onto their backs, flattening them on the ground in surprise. The projectile tore into the chimney, shattering it into countless fragments, which scattered across the field in a cloud of stone and debris. Evidently satisfied with the accuracy and destructive power of the new weapon, Rose stood up, brushed dirt from his uniform with a confident smile, and gave a subtle nod of approval. Emboldened by this success, Smooyer continued to fire at 2 additional chimneys located even further downrange, demonstrating the remarkable range and precision of the tank's weapon system. Rose, visibly impressed and convinced by the reliability of the Pershing, formally approved its deployment for active combat missions. If you are curious to learn how Smooyer's experimental tank performed amidst the bustling streets of Cologne, you might consider engaging with this story on a broader platform. Every interaction helps bring these long-forgotten stories to a wider audience. These stories are part of history, and sharing them contributes to keeping the memory alive of the innovations, struggles, and triumphs that shaped the war effort. Let us now return to the narrative of Smooyer and the tank that carried his hopes, the mighty Pershing. The very first of these tanks entered combat on February 25th, shortly after their division crossed the Roer River. Although the initial deployment was promising, the tank's resilience was soon put to the ultimate test. Just the very next day, a concealed Tiger tank 2.5 miles away managed to knock out one of the Pershings, revealing the danger posed by the formidable German armored adversaries. Despite this setback, the remaining Pershings proved their worth time and again, engaging in combat at ranges where the traditional American Sherman tanks would have struggled to deliver effective fire, often falling short against the advanced German defenses. By the beginning of March, the relentless push of the 3rd Armored Division was steadily progressing toward the Rhine River, a significant strategic objective marking Germany's border with the advancing Allied forces. The city of Cologne, notable for its industrial significance as Germany's 4th largest urban center before the war, sat on the western bank of the Rhine. The city's landscape had been transformed into a ruinous tableau of shattered buildings, twisted metal, and dust-filled skies, a result of numerous bombing raids by Allied aircraft. Over the course of nearly 375 air raids, an enormous toll, most of Cologne had been reduced to a wasteland, with only the twin spires of the famous Cologne Cathedral standing defiantly amidst the devastation, rising above the chaos like solemn tombstones marking the grave of what once was a vibrant city. On the morning of March the 6th, Smooyer's crew received their orders. They were to spearhead the assault into the heart of Cologne city center. Their Pershing, one of only 20 such tanks in all of Europe, an elite and rare machine, was designated as the first to break through every intersection to confront the dangers lurking in every alley and side street. These tanks would be the vanguard, inevitably attracting fire from numerous concealed enemy anti-tank guns positioned throughout the city. The assignment was a significant honor, personally selected by Major General Rose, who believed in their capability to lead the charge. As Smooyer prepared for the mission, he reached into his breast pocket and touched the small Bible he kept there, a personal talisman of faith and hope amidst chaos. He watched as the city streets ahead gradually narrowed into shadowed canyons of destruction, lined with crumbled facades and debris. At precisely 8 o'clock in the morning, the Pershing lurched forward, its engine growling softly as it made its way into the urban battlefield. Commanding from the turret was Staff Sergeant Robert Early, who kept a steady hand and clear eye on their movements. Corporal John Dergy carefully loaded the 90mm rounds, ensuring each was properly chambered. Private Homer Davis assisted with the machine gun mounted on the front of the tank, ready to engage any enemy infantry or soft targets. Meanwhile, Private William McVeigh took the wheel, skillfully maneuvering the tank through the wreckage-strewn streets, guiding it with practiced confidence. Inside the tank, Smooyer managed the main gun, poised to fire at any threat that dared emerge. The crew had been together since September of the previous year, having fought through some of the toughest campaigns, traversing Normandy's hedgerows and braving the icy depths of ardent snow drifts aboard their Sherman tank. Just 3 weeks before this momentous day, they had been issued the new Pershing, which they swiftly christened Eagle 7 after the beloved Philadelphia Eagles football team. This camaraderie, born from shared hardships and hardened by combat, fueled their resolve. Cologne's previous grandeur as a bustling metropolis of 1 million souls had been decimated, leaving possibly only 40,000 survivors, who now sought refuge in makeshift hiding places, cellars, subway tunnels, and underground shelters hidden beneath the mountain of rubble. The city's thoroughfares resembled deep canyons, lined with debris and remnants of the once bustling life that filled these streets. The facades of tall apartment buildings had folded into the roads like collapsing walls, and the tram lines, now fallen into disrepair, twisted into the air, metal vines twisting and swaying with every gust of wind. Every intersection became a potential trap, with dozens of hidden German Panzerfuchs teams poised to ambush advancing tanks. Every basement window could conceal a deadly 88mm anti-tank gun, waiting for the perfect moment to strike the invaders. By the time the 3rd Armored Division entered the outskirts of Cologne on March the 2nd, the city was already in ruins, and the battle for its streets was about to unfold, a fierce and relentless struggle for territorial control amid the wreckage of what was once a proud and thriving city. Following several days of intense, relentless house-to-house combat, the fighting in the city reached a grueling and chaotic crescendo. Over the course of those 4 days, American forces found themselves embroiled in a brutal urban war, where the defenders, entrenched within the city's intricate network of structures and underground passages, fought fiercely to hold their ground. The German defenders, well-versed in utilizing every inch of their environment to their advantage, employed the city's infrastructure in a highly strategic manner that complicated the American assault at every turn. One of their most effective tactics involved clandestine underground pedestrian tunnels that interconnected basements across entire city blocks, creating a labyrinthine network beneath the streets. These subterranean pathways, which soldiers jokingly dubbed mouse trails, provided the German troops with sudden, unpredictable reappearances behind American lines. With deadly precision, they would emerge from these hidden routes, launch surprise attacks, and before American soldiers could mount a proper response, they would retreat back into the darkness below, leaving chaos and confusion in their wake. Meanwhile, the German snipers, operating from elevated positions such as church steeples and factory chimneys, targeted American troops with deadly accuracy. Their rifles took shots from above, picking off soldiers at vulnerable moments. To counter this threat, American anti-tank crews patiently waited for opportunities when enemy vehicles, primarily German tanks, moved into vulnerable positions or crossed open spaces. These crews would then unleash their fire into the rear armor of passing tanks, which was notably thinner than the frontal armor, knowing that even the slight weakness could be exploited at the right moment. The Sherman tanks, a staple of the American armored forces, possessed significant advantages that were clearly evident on open battlefield terrain. Their frontal armor measured about 4 inches in thickness, which was twice as thick as that of the German Panzer IVs and many other contemporary tanks, providing substantial protection during head-on engagements. Additionally, their 75 or later variants provided firepower capable of destroying any German tank at combat range, giving the Shermans an unmistakable edge in open combat scenarios. However, the nature of urban warfare, characterized by narrow streets and close-quarters fighting, often diminished these advantages. The Pershing tanks, with their impressive specifications, still faced serious challenges in the city's crowded and damaged environment. Weighing around 46 tons, their immense weight became a liability because many of Cologne's bridges lacked the structural integrity to support such heavy vehicles. Streets that animals like Sherman tanks could navigate with relative ease suddenly turned into hazardous traps for the heavier Pershing. These streets, once open thoroughfares, transformed into obstacles that slowed or even halted the advance. During the ongoing battle, Smooyer, observing through his tank's periscope, watched Eagle 7, the name of their armored unit, as it rolled past the remnants of what had once been a vibrant shopping district. The chaos was stark. Mannequins, once part of retail displays, now lay scattered amidst a jumble of bricks and shattered glass. An overturned streetcar, its windows shattered by shell fire, blocked the street, while entire blocks blazed in flames, consumed by fires that had broken out during the bombardment. The penetrating smell of smoke, mixed with the acrid stench of burning materials and even worse substances, seeped into the tank's ventilation system, making breathing increasingly difficult and adding to the sense of chaos. Progress was slow and arduous. Every 40 yards, the Pershing would halt, giving McVeigh, the tank commander or crew member responsible for checking the surroundings, the chance to scan for hidden dangers. Rubble piles along the street served as potential hiding spots for mines, their presence a constant threat that required vigilance. Shell craters, remnants of previous bombardments, created hazards that could damage tracks or cause immobilization. All the while, the tank's radio crackled with updates from other units. Sherman tanks were deploying through side streets, clearing abandoned buildings, and infantry squads moved cautiously from one structure to another, each step fighting against the German resistance that proved to be lighter than anticipated. Most Wehrmacht units, during the darkness of the previous night, had already begun withdrawing across the Rhine River, leaving behind a strategic evacuation. The bridges connecting the city to the opposite bank had been rigged with demolition charges by German engineers, who waited patiently for the command to destroy them, preventing the advancing Allied forces from crossing freely. Only rearguard units, composed of volunteers who had pledged to fight until their last round, remained behind on the western side of the river, determined to delay the enemy's progress for as long as possible. As Eagle 7 maneuvered around a corner and entered a broader avenue, Smooyer's focus sharpened. Ahead stretched the majestic twin spires of Cologne Cathedral, looming over the cityscape from a distance of perhaps half a mile. Many called the cathedral's survival through relentless bombing campaigns a miracle. Although the surrounding city had been reduced to ruins by nearly 262 air raids that left the area a wasteland of debris, the medieval stone structure itself remained untouched, standing as a resilient symbol amidst destruction. Its Gothic towers served as crucial navigation points for every military unit operating within the city, with each map reference beginning from the cathedral. Radio communications often referenced the spires as a landmark, guiding troops and aircraft alike. As the Pershing advanced another block further, the streets gradually widened, indicating that they were nearing the heart of the city's center. However, this increasing openness brought with it new dangers. Wider streets meant longer lines of sight for German gunners, affording them more time to aim and fire accurately. Smooyer kept his eye pressed firmly to the gun sight, meticulously scanning each window and doorway for signs of enemy activity. His right hand hovered near the turret traverse control, ready to turn the gun rapidly in any direction. His left hand lingered close to the trigger, prepared for the moment when the threat might emerge. Suddenly, at precisely 9:15 in the morning, the tank's radio erupted with new orders. Intelligence reports confirmed that German tanks were operating in the vicinity of the Cathedral Square. Confirmation came of at least 2 Panther tanks, formidable adversaries known for their superior armor and firepower, and there was a possibility of a Tiger tank being present as well. The reconnaissance and intelligence teams knew that engagements in this part of the city could escalate quickly, and the presence of such heavy German armor meant that American forces had to be prepared for a fierce and potentially dangerous confrontation at the center of Cologne. After sustaining casualties earlier in the engagement, the American infantry temporarily withdrew to regroup and assess their situation. Meanwhile, the soldier known as Eagle 7 was assigned a new mission: to advance toward the area around the Cathedral and neutralize any remaining enemy armor threats that might be lurking there. As the vehicle moved forward, Smooyer couldn't help but notice how his mouth suddenly felt unusually dry, a nervous response perhaps, reflecting the tension of the moment. The tank they were operating, a Pershing, had already seen combat against various German tanks, but had never directly faced one of the formidable Panther tanks in a head-on encounter. All crew members were well aware of the stark differences between their machine and their German opponents. The statistics alone painted a clear picture of the danger they faced. The Panther's frontal armor was notable for being approximately 5 inches thick, designed to withstand most incoming shells from typical anti-tank weapons of the era. Additionally, its main armament, a 75mm gun, had the capability to penetrate about 6 inches of steel at a distance of 1,000 yards, making it a lethal adversary in any confrontation. History and battle reports had made it clear that a single Panther, when positioned tactically, could decimate an entire American platoon, especially when used with skill and coordinating firepower from other tanks and infantry. The Pershing's engine growled steadily as McVeigh, the tank's commander, increased the throttle to push the vehicle forward at a faster pace. Through the periscope, the towering spires of the Cathedral gradually filled the field of view, serving as a stark visual marker of their objective. Ahead, somewhere in the fog of war, German tank crews lurked, concealed behind debris and shattered buildings, awaiting the approaching American forces. At exactly 9:30 in the morning, Eagle 7 drew closer to the Cathedral district, a sector where the once bustling streets had become narrow alleys flanked by remnants of buildings still standing amidst the chaos. Many of these structures range from 4 to 5 stories high, creating a tangled urban environment often described as resembling canyons. A place where sunlight scarcely touched the cracked pavements below, filtered through a thick haze of smoke drifting lazily from fires set earlier in the day. This haze obstructed visibility, blending ruins into shadows and turning the landscape into a perilous maze. To navigate this treacherous terrain, McVeigh slowed the Pershing to what could be called near-walking speed. Despite the reduced noise at this low throttle setting, every turn of the tank's heavy treads still resonated loudly against the stone and brick walls, echoing through the deserted cityscape and making their presence known. Smooyer, stationed in the turret, rotated the weapons and observation instruments carefully, keeping a vigilant watch on the left flank of the street, while Davis, meanwhile, maintained a steady scanning position through his periscopic sight mounted on the bow gun, observing the right side. The primary armament, a 90mm main gun, moved smoothly across shattered storefronts and the dark mouths of alleyways, as if searching for threats in a landscape where every broken window seemed to stare back with empty, ominous sockets like the hollow eyes of a skull. This particular district of Cologne, prior to the outbreak of war, had been a thriving center for commerce. It was filled with department stores, bustling cafes, sleek office buildings, all symbols of daily life and economic activity. Now, however, it existed as a distorted mosaic of destruction and shadow, a ruinous labyrinth where any doorway could conceal a deadly Panzerfaust team or hidden enemy infantry ready to ambush. Communication crackled intermittently through the radio, transmitting quick, compressed updates. One such message reported that 2 squads of American infantry had become pinned down approximately 3 blocks east of the Cathedral. Enemy machine guns, placed at multiple points, accompanied by mortar rounds falling relentlessly on their position, had left the soldiers vulnerable and outnumbered. These infantry units desperately needed armored support to break free and maneuver to safer ground, but all attempts by Shermans to reach them had been thwarted by the debris-blocked streets. The wider avenue, which Eagle 7 was currently following, remained the only feasible route through the ruins that offered a clear path toward the Cathedral Square. Another radio message came through shortly afterward. 2 Sherman tanks from Easy Company had made an attempt to advance from the north, aiming to reach the cathedral itself. However, both of these vehicles had been operating without infantry escort, a risky move in the urban battlefield where ambushes and close-quarter combat posed a constant threat. The Sherman crews had been instructed to proceed cautiously, to scout the area around the cathedral, identify enemy positions, and subsequently pull back to await reinforcements. A standard reconnaissance mission carefully coordinated as part of a broader tactical plan. Captain Early, one of the commanding officers, acknowledged this transmission and confirmed that Eagle 7 was to establish contact with the Sherman tanks from Easy Company near the cathedral. The hope was that the combined firepower of all 3 armored vehicles could suppress anticipated enemy defensive positions for enough time to allow the infantry to push forward. This approach was a classic example of combined arms tactics, integrating tanks, infantry, and supporting fire to maximize their chances of success. It was a methodology that the 3rd Armored Division had successfully executed countless times since their landings in Normandy, demonstrating their flexibility and combat effectiveness in urban warfare. As McVeigh's Pershing moved past a burnt and abandoned German half-track, the crew observed the grisly aftermath of earlier combat. Nearby, the bodies of its crew lay sprawled in the street, victims of American machine gunfire sometime within the past 24 hours. The sight of the destroyed vehicle and fallen soldiers served as a grim reminder of the violence that had recently transpired in this once lively district. Beyond this scene of destruction, the street abruptly opened into a small, forlorn plaza. At its center stood a fountain, now dry and marred with numerous shell fragments, bearing witness to the ferocity of the battles fought here. The avenue continued straight ahead, leading directly toward the towering cathedral spires that loomed in the distance, crowned with an unmistakable sense of finality and importance. Precisely at 9:47, Smooyer, from his vantage point inside the tank, detected a faint but distinct sound through his headset, an auditory cue that signaled something significant was unfolding in the unfolding chaos of the city, adding yet another layer of tension and anticipation to their already tense mission. 2 sudden and thunderous explosions echoed fiercely from somewhere ahead on the street, their deep, resonant booms reverberating through the air with unmistakable intensity. These were not ordinary sounds. They signified the crashing power of heavy artillery, likely from the colossal caliber of tank guns engaging in fierce combat. After these initial 2 detonations, a brief, unsettling silence descended over the area, creating a tense pause that seemed to stretch on endlessly, as if time itself had momentarily frozen. Then, out of the stillness, a 3rd powerful boom shattered the silence, confirming that the chaos of gunfire was still ongoing. It was unmistakably the sound of tank fire, distinctive, sharp, and unmistakably the crack of high-velocity projectiles impacting thick armor plating, accompanied by the characteristic audible thump of rounds striking their targets. These sounds told a story of relentless armored clashes, with each shot indicating the ferocity of the confrontation. Just moments later, the radio filed the airwaves with frantic urgency, a jumble of transmissions in rapid succession that reflected the chaos and immediacy of the battlefield. It was confirmed that the Sherman tank from Company F had been hit, an ominous blow signifying that the enemy's firepower was effective. The crew had begun to bail out swiftly, escaping from their damaged vehicle as the crewmen scrambled to abandon their compromised machine in the midst of the firefight. Meanwhile, another Sherman from the same company was now under attack, taking hits from an unseen but nearby enemy force. The location of the German tank, hidden in ambush, remained uncertain, but its proximity was unmistakable. Close enough to the cathedral that one could reliably estimate its position, yet its exact whereabouts remained elusive. All units in the vicinity were now on high alert, with urgent advisories issued that a Panther tank was operating somewhere near the cathedral's grounds. The presence of this formidable adversary had become a pressing concern for the Allied forces. Early's voice, steady and calm despite the perilous circumstances, crackled through the intercom, a reassuring anchor amid the chaos. He informed the crew that their objective, the Eagle 7, would continue advancing forward, maintaining their aggressive stance. They were unique in their position. They stood as the only American tank capable of engaging the enemy at this moment, given that the other Shermans from Company F had likely been destroyed or rendered completely immobile due to damage. Meanwhile, the infantry was held back, unable to push forward into the streets while a German tank dominated the square. The strategic objective remained unchanged: to eliminate the enemy's armored threat at all costs. McVeigh, the tank commander, shifted into a higher gear, signaling a slight acceleration of their Pershing. Although this increase in speed was still modest, considerably slower than what might be typical in open fields, it represented an important tactical maneuver in the urban environment. Moving faster came with its inherent risks. It meant making more noise, and noise would alert the enemy to their approach. Yet, speed also reduced the time they would be exposed to enemy fire in any fixed position, making it a calculated risk that could tip the scales of the engagement. Smooyer, another crewman, systematically checked his ammunition hold, noting that the ready rack contained 6 90mm rounds, all within arm's reach for rapid deployment. These were divided into 3 armor-piercing rounds designed to puncture the thickest enemy armor, and 3 high-explosive rounds intended for softer targets or structures. Duragi, positioned inside the turret, had arranged additional ammunition throughout the turret, organized meticulously by type, prepared for a prolonged fight. In such an encounter, they estimated they could fire roughly 20 rounds before needing to resupply from the main hall storage. Against a formidable adversary such as a Panther, the engagement would likely be decided within the first handful of shots, perhaps after only the first 2 or 3, because armor-piercing round would likely destroy the German tank swiftly, but if they missed or were ineffective, then the Panther could just as easily eliminate Eagle 7 in return. Armor-to-armor combat, especially between battle tanks, typically did not last long, each volley often deciding the fate of the confrontation within seconds. The street ahead of Eagle 7 gently curved to the left, a subtle bend in the urban landscape that masked what lay beyond. Beyond that curve, the grand sight of Cathedral Square awaited, a wide open space where the cathedral's towering spires would come into full view. Somewhere within that square, or on the streets immediately surrounding it, was the waiting crew of a Panther tank, likely concealed behind debris or wreckage, ready to strike. They had already inflicted casualties, having killed at least 3 American tankers in the earlier fights, and they were well aware that more U.S. forces were advancing. The German crew was certainly under pressure and well prepared for the final showdown. Smooyer pressed his eye firmly against the rubberized cushion of the gun's sight, aligning his vision with the target ahead. His finger moved cautiously to rest on the trigger, prepared to fire at a moment's notice. The turret traverse control under his right hand felt solid and responsive, providing the precision needed to aim accurately. Eagle 7 rounded the bend at approximately 15 miles per hour, the clanking of its tracks on the broken pavement echoing the harsh realities of urban warfare. Exhaust fumes streamed from the engine grills, evidence of the work and strain the tank's powerful engine was enduring under battle conditions. Filling the forward view blocks, the spires of the cathedral loomed into sight, a commanding Gothic silhouette rising dramatically above the rubble-strewn landscape. At precisely 9:52 hours, a time etched into the minds of those involved, the grand facade of the cathedral came fully into view. The towering structure dominated the skyline, its twin spires soaring to an impressive height of 516 feet above the surrounding debris and destruction. The plaza directly in front of the cathedral spanned approximately 300 yards across, once carefully paved with stone, but now scarred and obscured by countless shell craters, wreckage, and debris left by the relentless fighting. Across this terrain, The infamous Hohenzollern Bridge was faintly visible beyond the cathedral, a strategic crossing that had been rigged and fortified by German engineers with enough explosives to annihilate the entire structure and send it crashing into the river below. Smoke drifted lazily across the square, remnants of ongoing fires sparked by the bombing and shelling in adjacent buildings that still burned fiercely. Through this haze, Smooyer could see his first target, a Sherman tank sitting motionless in the middle of a street intersecting Eagle 7's path. The tank was positioned at an angle, as though it had halted suddenly, perhaps in a defensive stance or in anticipation of the force approaching. This scene, the imposing cathedral, the damaged square, the distant bridge, and the silent yet fiercely prepared enemy, set the stage for the decisive clash. Every element carried the weight of anticipation, knowing that amidst these ruins, the next moves would determine the fate of the battle and, ultimately, the control of this critical battleground. Suddenly, a thick plume of smoke erupted violently from the open hatch where the tank commander's head had been moments before. The jarring sight of the cannon barrel, now raised awkwardly skyward at an unusual angle, indicated a sudden and intense combat development. McVeigh, the tank's commander, responded swiftly, bringing the mighty Eagle 7 to a cautious stop just one city block away from the central square that lay ahead. From this strategic vantage point, the crew watched intently as the scene below unfolded. Hidden in the shadows cast by a partially collapsed office building, the Pershing tank settled into a concealed position, its armor nearly blending into the debris-strewn surroundings. This carefully chosen spot allowed the crew to observe the square without revealing their own position, thus maintaining the element of surprise and safety. Early, a keen-eyed observer diligently examined the scene through his high-tech vision aid devices, his gaze repeatedly sweeping across the battlefield. His sharp eyes confirmed that the first Sherman tank had definitely sustained at least 2 significant hits, probably within seconds of each other, implying the skill and precision of the opponent's gunnery. The German tank crew demonstrated remarkable professionalism. Their ability to aim, fire, and catch their targets unerringly revealed their mastery of battle. From Early's vantage point, the second Sherman was completely hidden from view, out of sight behind a cluster of buildings. Yet, through direct radio communications and intelligence reports, they knew its position lay somewhere along the northern edge of the square, also disabled, yet still functioning as a potential threat. This meant that the German forces had established a formidable defensive setup, with their tanks positioned to dominate multiple approaches leading toward the Grand Cathedral at the heart of the town. Any American vehicle attempting to dash across the open space risked immediate and devastating fire. The Germans' tactical positioning allowed them to track and target any crossing movement with lethal efficiency. Early quickly recognized the necessity of an alternate approach. Rather than rushing blindly into the fray, he resolved to conduct a detailed reconnaissance on foot. Leaving the formidable Pershing tank exposed and stationary posed its own dangers, but advancing blindly into a well-prepared ambush, or into the lethal lines of sight of the enemy tanks, would be an even greater risk. Early understood that he needed to ascertain the exact location, orientation, and concealment of the German Panther tank before making a decisive move with Eagle 7. With resolve, he climbed out from the hatch atop the turret and carefully descended to the street, alert for any sign of enemy activity. Just 30 yards ahead, an American soldier emerged from a nearby doorway, clear evidence of the chaos still swirling through this city. This soldier was none other than Technical Sergeant Jim Bates, a seasoned member of the Army Signal Corps. Bates carried with him a 16mm film camera, along with a sturdy rucksack laden with numerous film magazines, an essential tool for documenting the relentless progress of the 3rd Armored Division since their landing in Normandy. Throughout the campaign, Bates had been capturing vital footage of combat scenes, interviewing fellow soldiers, recording the liberation of towns, villages, and landmarks. His footage had been featured in newsreels, shown in theaters across America, broadcasting vivid images of the war's realities back home. Bates, who had been nearby when the first Sherman was struck, had witnessed the entire engagement unfold. He had captured the glint of the German tank's muzzle flash, the explosion that rocked the turret of the disabled Sherman, and the frantic efforts of the crew as they attempted to escape the burning wreckage. His footage was invaluable, providing a clear and detailed record of the event from start to finish. Now, with even greater purpose, Bates sought to document the ongoing saga. The presence of such a formidable American heavy tank in the heart of Cologne was a story in itself. Plus, a rare encounter, a direct battle, between the Pershing and a formidable German Panther tank promised to be an extraordinary spectacle, captivating both military historians and the public alike. Without hesitation, Early and Bates moved forward together cautiously, their bodies pressed close to the walls of the surrounding buildings to avoid detection. They approached a street corner that offered the perfect vantage point to observe the entire Cathedral Square while remaining concealed. Early methodically scanned the area, using his optics, seeking any sign of movement or unusual disturbance. The crippled Sherman sat silently, its abandoned turret a haunting reminder of the fierce fighting that had just taken place. Beyond it, partially hidden behind a side street and piles of rubble, Early spotted a sleek German Panther tank, its position carefully concealed, yet clearly set for ambush. Its long, 75mm barrel protruded ominously from the angular turret, like a weapon poised at the ready, pointing directly down the avenue where the American Shermans had approached moments before. The Panther's crew had selected their hideout with great care, choosing a position that gave them a commanding view of the square and the approaching avenues, while remaining partially concealed from direct fire. Their strategic placement enabled them to cover the entire battlefield. Any American tank daring to enter the open ground would be exposed to the deadly crossfire. Early quickly took measure of the tactical situation, considering the battlefield geometry. He realized that from the Panther's vantage point, the German tank could not see Eagle 7's current position. Its line of sight was blocked by the damaged buildings around them. However, if Eagle 7 decided to move into the open square, the Germans would spot it at once, their well-placed ambush ready to unleash devastating fire. The open expanse before them spanned roughly 300 yards, a distance that favored neither side in a direct confrontation. Neither the Americans nor the Germans held a decisive advantage in such an encounter, especially given the limited visibility and the careful concealment surrounding the German position. Early understood that advancing directly into this open terrain would be perilous for Eagle 7, as it risked exposing the tank's vulnerable sides to the concealed German gun emplacement. He recognized that any attack across this wide, exposed space would require meticulous planning to avoid walking straight into a deadly trap, where a single well-aimed shot could end the tank's journey prematurely. In contemplating his next move, Early knew that rushing forward into the square would likely result in catastrophic consequences, so he carefully assessed the battlefield, weighing every option. His objective was to gather enough intelligence, precise positioning, and the extent of the enemy's concealment before committing Eagle 7 to any maneuver. The decision to reconnaissance on foot reflected his cautious but determined approach, understanding that with patience and precise knowledge, they could tilt the odds back in their favor. The existential risk was high, but the potential intelligence gain was vital for planning their next move in this fierce and unpredictable urban battlefield. At that critical moment, both armored vehicles, each armed with formidable guns, possessed the firepower capable of piercing the other's armor at the range they found themselves in. The threat was immediate and palpable. Yet, amid this tense standoff, an alternative strategy was suddenly apparent. Nearby, a side street ran almost parallel to Eagle 7's avenue, a narrow alleyway that could provide a tactical advantage if utilized wisely. If the Pershing crew could maneuver around the block via this side route, they had a chance to approach the enemy position from the west, potentially catching the German tank off guard from an unexpected angle. The Panther's main gun was initially oriented facing directly north, aligned with its usual line of sight toward threats from that direction. To engage targets approaching from the west, the tank's turret would need to rotate, a process that, although swift, still required a few crucial seconds, likely between 3 and 4. before the gun could be aimed accurately. These seconds, though brief, could make the difference between a successful shot and a missed opportunity, making timing everything in this high-stakes maneuver. Meanwhile, Early, the commander of Eagle 7, had quickly grasped the essence of the plan and communicated it clearly over the intercom. The orders were concise and strategic. The tanks would advance cautiously along the parallel side street, seeking to avoid detection and lines of fire. Once they reached the intersection closest to the Cathedral, a notable landmark in the landscape, they would execute a decisive turn to the left, thereby entering the open square. From this vantage point, the Panther would be positioned approximately to their right side, about 90 degrees relative to Eagle 7's main gun orientation, offering a chance for a precise and potentially lethal shot. In this coordinated movement, Smooyer was tasked with firing upon the German tank side armor, its most vulnerable spot, given that the side panels offered the least protection, aiming to deliver a shot formidable enough to neutralize the threat conclusively. McVeigh acknowledged the plan with a firm nod as Durkee prepared and loaded an armor-piercing round designed specifically for penetrating heavy steel defenses. Simultaneously, Davis readied the bow gun, positioning himself to swiftly support the attack from a different angle. With the turret already rotated approximately 90 degrees to the right in anticipation, Smooyer carefully aligned the main gun with the prospective approach point, meticulously calibrating the angle of fire as they moved forward. The Pershing's engine roared to life, signaling the beginning of their advance. The mammoth vessel, at approximately 46 tons of steel, began its steady, deliberate roll toward the enemy position, embodying both power and precision. Somewhere above, Bates assumed his vantage point, a second-story window overlooking the Cathedral Square, and prepared his camera, knowing that capturing this moment could be crucial for recounting the operation later. The Eagle 7, inching forward on its narrow, winding approach, was heading directly toward the intersection where the Panther's crew lay in wait. At 9:58, the Pershing entered the side street, which was narrower than the main avenue, barely wide enough to contain its massive bulk. The area was strewn with the debris of recent bombardments. Fragments of shattered buildings and scattered wreckage littered the pavement, a chaotic tableau that made navigation challenging. McVeigh skillfully maneuvered around a large crater, maintaining a steady velocity that balanced speed with caution. Too slow, and the tanks risked becoming easy targets. Too fast, and they risked losing control or misfiring their weapons due to instability. Through the driver's vision blocks, beyond the intersection, the open expanse of the Cathedral Square beckoned to the side, awaiting their arrival. Smooyer kept his eyes fixed on the gun sight, tracking the anticipated trajectory of the German tank as it emerged from the corner. His finger hovered poised on the trigger, ready for the decisive moment. The turret had already been turned approximately 90 degrees to the right, aligning the main gun with the expected point of appearance, an indication of meticulous preparation and rapid response. As they approached the corner, the atmosphere grew tense, knowing that combat rarely adhered to plans perfectly. The distance to the Panther was shrinking rapidly, 50 yards, then 40 yards, then 30, each meter bringing them closer to the crucial confrontation. McVeigh maintained a consistent speed, aware that the sound of the engine would alert the enemy crew to their approach. German soldiers would, undoubtedly, hear the Pershing long before they could see it, although in the echoing alleyways, determining the direction of sound was complicated and uncertain. At 20 yards, the Pershing's bow emerged from the side street directly into the intersection. McVeigh, peering through his periscope, had only a limited view to the right, but it was enough. He saw the German Panther sitting exactly where Early had anticipated, perhaps about 110 yards away. While this was within effective range for the Panther's 90mm gun, which could deliver a lethal shot at that distance, the turret was already in motion, its long barrel rotating smoothly toward the approaching target. Someone inside the German tank detected the Pershing earlier than expected, a sign that the element of surprise was slipping away. McVeigh faced a split-second decision: continue as planned or abort to avoid becoming an easy target. He chose not to stop the tank, knowing that halting would leave Eagle 7 vulnerable and immobilized, a sitting target for the enemy. Instead, driven by instinct and experience, he pressed the accelerator firmly, gunning the throttle to push the Pershing forward, demonstrating resolve in the face of imminent threat. The Pershing tank, advancing with determined resolve, abruptly surged forward into the busy intersection, some distance ahead of the German forces' line of fire. Its heavy hull and imposing silhouette moved swiftly, cutting across the crossroads with purpose. Yet in doing so, it inadvertently entered the devastatingly narrow vista of the German Panther's gun sights. Smooyer, seated at the controls of the American tank, caught sight of the formidable Panther emerging in his scope. The tank appeared with an unmistakably characteristic silhouette, its angular turret, designed for optimal armor protection, and a long, powerful gun barrel that seemed to sway menacingly toward him. The dark muzzle of the barrel seemed almost alive, poised to fire. Every instinct within Smouyer's mind screamed warnings. He instinctively knew that he was staring down the formidable barrel of a 75mm cannon, one capable of punching through his tank's armor at this very distance. Despite the instinctual warning, training swiftly took precedence. Smooyer knew that American tanks, especially during this phase of the conflict, rarely fired while in motion because their guns lacked stabilization and accuracy dropped dramatically when the vehicle was moving. Yet, waiting for the Pershing to come to a halt was simply not an option. Stalling would mean exposing himself to danger or being left vulnerable, and in that moment, standing still could be deadly. Recognizing the critical importance of accuracy, he calmly, but decisively, compensated for the movement of his own tank. He anticipated the target's motion, leading the shot just slightly ahead of the advancing turret, and carefully squeezed the trigger. At precisely 9 hours and 59 minutes and 12 seconds, the 90mm gun roared to life. The armor-piercing round tore through the open space between the two tanks in a split second, covering roughly 110 yards in a fraction of a second, an almost instantaneous journey across the battlefield. The projectile struck the front of the Panther's turret face, just beneath the thick gun mantlet, the heavily armored, rounded section designed to shield the gun from incoming fire. The impact was stark and immediate, its force visibly evidenced even amidst the bright muzzle flash and billowing smoke that accompanied the shot. Sparks and shards of metal exploded outward from the point of contact, showering the interior of the Panther with a barrage of fiery debris. The impact ignited fragments of metal that spalled off inside the tank's turret and crept into the crew compartment as lethal shrapnel, threatening the lives of everyone inside. Inside the Panther, Oberleutnant Wilhelm Bartelborth, the tank's commander, was caught in a moment of stunned disbelief, trying to process what he had just witnessed. The vehicle that had appeared suddenly at the intersection was unlike a typical German tank in many respects. Its silhouette was too low, its angles slightly different, almost reminiscent of a German design, but clearly an American tank. His mind hesitated, wavering between uncertainty and recognition. Was this new threat a friendly force? A misidentification that could cost him dearly? The question flickered in his mind for maybe half a second, a brief moment of doubt. Then another reality struck him with brutal clarity. The impact had struck its target, and the threat was real. At that critical moment, McVeigh, the commander of the Pershing, swiftly brought his tank to a complete halt right in the middle of the intersection. Now fully exposed, the Pershing faced open ground ahead, with no nearby cover or protective elements. Yet, there was a strategic advantage to stopping. It allowed Smooyer and his crew to establish accurate aim, a vital factor when engaging such dangerous opponents. Durgi, the gunner, was already prepared, with another armor-piercing shell firmly gripped in his hands, ready for the next shot. The breech of the tank's gun was swiftly opened, a metal hatch flung aside with a practiced motion. Durgi rammed the second shell home, locking the breech securely into place, ensuring the gun was ready to fire once again. Throughout this tense exchange, Smooyer kept his gaze fixed unwaveringly on the sight, the target threading through the crosshairs. The first shot had hit high on the turret, a respectable hit, but not devastatingly destructive. The Panther was still mobile and dangerous, though its armor had been compromised. Smooyer readjusted his aim slightly downward, focusing on the side, just below the turret ring, an area where armor was notably thinner, approximately 40 millimeters compared to the 80 millimeters on the front. His knowledge of armor specifications guided his judgment. With a 90 millimeter gun's capability to penetrate up to 40 millimeters of steel at this range, he knew this shot had a high probability of success. At 9 hours, 59 minutes, and 17 seconds, he fired again, the unit of time emphasizing the precision and rapid pace of the engagement. The second armor-piercing round sped through the open battlefield, this time striking the right side of the Panther, piercing through the thinner armor plate and continuing onward, tearing through the interior of the crew compartment. The projectile exited through the opposite side, the left side armor, leaving behind two large holes, roughly the size of dinner plates, gaping wounds that indicated a violent and destructive impact. Inside the tank, chaos erupted as systems that kept the vehicle operational began to fail rapidly. Hydraulic lines ruptured, losing pressure and rendering many mechanisms useless. The crew quickly realized that their situation was becoming increasingly perilous as the ongoing damage compromised critical systems. Within moments, the ignition of ammunition ignited an inferno. Wilhelm Bartelborth, the tank's commander, reacted instantly. He threw open his hatch and leapt out to escape the deadly interior, landing safely on the street behind the now-burning Panther, moving away from the threatening Pershing. His actions were quickly followed by 3 other crew members, who scrambled out through their respective hatches in quick succession, their movements hurried and tense, as smoke and flames billowed from the engine compartment, obscuring the interior and signaling imminent destruction. Tragically, one crew member was unable to escape in time and lost his life amidst the chaos. Meanwhile, Smooyer, witnessing the escalating destruction, fired a third shot at 9 hours, 59 minutes, and 23 seconds. This round aimed low on the turret, just above the point where the hull met the turret basket, a junction often vulnerable to disarmament or destruction. The impact ignited a fierce burst of flame, the heat and energy spreading rapidly from the point of contact. As the fiery explosion intensified, flames quickly consumed the entire tank, feeding on spilled fuel and burning hydraulic fluid, transforming the Panther into a blazing inferno. The once mighty vehicle was now a burning wreck, a deadly and unmistakable testament to the devastating power of the American counterattack. Throughout this frantic and destructive engagement, Jim Bates, positioned just outside the chaos, kept his camera rolling. He captured the entire sequence of events, the precise moments from the initial shot to the final blaze. His footage encapsulated the intensity, precision, and chaos of the battle, freeze-framing the moment when the Panther was engulfed in flames, only some 45 seconds after the first shot rang out, each second a crucial element in the unfolding story of armored combat. The event that unfolded on that day captured the entire battlefield in vivid detail, leaving no moment unrecorded or unseen. It was as if every crucial second, every burst of gunfire, every explosion was laid bare for all to witness. The film footage showed the entire sequence of what transpired with remarkable clarity, starting with the Pershing tank advancing into an intersection, its massive frame looming prominently in the shot. Observers could see the moment when a German anti-tank gun swiveled into position, its barrel rotating smoothly to target the approaching enemy. The camera captured the firing of muzzle flashes, illuminating the scene with brief bursts of fiery light as the gun discharged. The impact of shells hitting their targets was vividly portrayed. The shockwaves, the debris flying, and the armor being struck forcefully. In the chaos, the crew of the Pershing made the decision to abandon their vehicle, bailing out quickly and jumping clear of the burning wreck. The footage then shifted focus to the crew member known as Smoker, who reclined slightly away from his gun sight, his hands trembling visibly, an unmistakable sign of the intense tension and adrenaline coursing through him. The destroyed Panther tank, once a formidable foe, now lay completely ravaged, its armor melted and twisted from the relentless assault. In stark contrast, Eagle 7, the Steel Eagle, remained unscathed. Its metal gleamed faintly amidst the smoke and chaos, a testament to its resilience and the skillful execution of its crew. Miraculously, everyone in the Eagle 7's crew was alive and accounted for, a fact that underscored the brutal, yet often fortunate reality of armored warfare. This small victory demonstrated that the Pershing had indeed demonstrated its might by swiftly destroying the Panther. The inferno that engulfed the fallen enemy tank persisted for several hours, the flames flickering and dancing as the fire inside the ammunition compartments continued to ignite. The inside of the Panther's hull was a chaotic scene. Ammunition cooking off, sparks and fragments bursting outward like fiery fireworks, filling the air with dangerous projectiles and a cloud of smoke that refused to settle. By midday, the relentless flames had consumed everything flammable within reach, reducing the once mighty tank to a charred and blackened ruin, its turret tilted at an unnatural angle due to the intense heat warping its metal form. Around the Cathedral Square, the bodies of German soldiers lay scattered, a grim and haunting reminder of the fierce confrontation that had taken place. The infantry units who had been supporting the Panther, recognizing that the armor had been compromised beyond repair, had begun withdrawing across the Rhine, retreating to regroup for future engagements since their defensive line had crumbled under the relentless Allied assault. As the day progressed into the early afternoon, American forces steadily moved into the area, their presence now undeniable. Bates, having taken the opportunity to descend from his vantage point atop an observation post, approached the crew of Eagle 7 as they stood outside their tank. In the chill of the afternoon, the crew members were casually smoking cigarettes, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and relief, while systematically inspecting their vehicle for damage. Though, as the reports confirmed, they had escaped without a scratch. The Panther had never fired a shot in their direction during the entire engagement, a fortunate outcome that could only be attributed to the hesitation and careful tactics of their opponent. Bates took out his camera and began filming as the crew members posed confidently near their tank, capturing the moment for posterity. Smooyer, standing slightly to the side, appeared uneasy with the attention, perhaps feeling the weight of the recent victory and the importance of the moment. It was nearly 4 o'clock in the afternoon when additional American units had completed their securing of the Cathedral zone, establishing control and beginning thorough checks of key infrastructure. Engineers moved swiftly to examine the Hohenzollern Bridge, searching for any demolition charges that might still threaten the advancing forces, while infantry squads meticulously cleared out remaining pockets of resistance within nearby buildings. Fortunately, the resistance was light, a clear indication that most German forces had already retreated or been neutralized during the fierce engagement with the Panther. The thunderous sounds of heavy tank guns echoing through the city center served as a stark warning to the retreating German troops that their defensive positions were rapidly collapsing. The relentless pounding signified the Americans' dominance in the ongoing battle for Cologne, but it was important to recognize that the fight was not yet over. Several German units still held strategic portions of the city, particularly to the east of the Cathedral, where isolated strongpoints remained entrenched in stubborn resistance. These pockets needed to be eliminated if the Allies were to seize complete control of the city. Orders were promptly issued for Eagle 7 and its crew to press forward and continue their advance deeper into the wreckage of Cologne. With a renewed sense of purpose, the crew swiftly remounted their tank. McVeigh initiated the engine, and the massive Pershing engine roared to life, its powerful growl echoing through the ruins. The tank rumbled onward into the devastated urban landscape, deeper into the partially shattered, war-torn city. At precisely 2:43 in the afternoon, Eagle 7 maneuvered into a narrow street, just a few blocks away from the cathedral. The towering buildings on either side formed in claustrophobic corridor, barely wider than the tank itself, creating a tense and narrow passage that tested the crew's precision and nerves. The street continued ahead toward a small intersection, beyond which the route extended toward the banks of the Rhine River. Suddenly, from a side street, a sleek black automobile darted out at high speed, rushing across the intersection with reckless urgency. The vehicle was weaving rapidly between chunks of rubble, abandoned debris, and wreckage strewn across the street in chaotic disarray, behaving not unlike a staff car, the kind used by German officers to shuttle between command posts in times of war. In the chaos of urban combat, any vehicle that appeared suddenly and without warning could pose a serious threat. Since civilians had been evacuated from Cologne many weeks before, any individual still present within the city limits was presumed to be either an armed combatant or someone actively engaged in supporting the German war effort. Without hesitation, Smooyer reacted instantly. He opened fire with a coaxial machine gun mounted on the tank. Tracer rounds streaked through the air, illuminating the streets with fiery lines. Several of the projectiles struck the sides of the rapidly moving vehicle, with pieces of metal and panels exploding outward upon impact. The glass windows shattered, showering shards onto the street. Yet somehow, the car did not stop or slow down. It continued to race forward, disappearing into another street beyond the intersection, as if determined to evade capture or destruction. At that very moment, from the concealed position to Smooyer's left, a second threat materialized. A German Panzer IV tank, lurking behind cover, which opened fire in response. Its machine gun spat out a rapid stream of bullets directed at the same fleeing vehicle, adding yet another layer of danger to an already tense situation in the midst of the urban battle zone. The tank was cleverly concealed behind a partially destroyed building, its position expertly hidden from Eagle 7's view. Its crew, however, was acutely aware of the surroundings and had quickly spotted an approaching vehicle, an automobile moving cautiously nearby, and had engaged in a swift, coordinated attack. As a result, both tanks opened fire almost simultaneously, unleashing a barrage of shells aimed directly at the car. The vehicle jostled violently under the heavy impact, abruptly coming to a halt in the middle of the street. Inside the car, the driver slumped forward, slumping over the steering wheel as if overwhelmed, and was quickly rendered immobile. Meanwhile, the door on the passenger side swung open, and a figure tumbled out onto the pavement, collapsing onto the street with no sign of movement, likely incapacitated or killed in the barrage. At the same moment, Smooyer witnessed a sudden, bright flash, an unmistakable muzzle flash from a German tank that was hidden behind the debris. That tank was of an older model, probably a Panzer IV, most likely a Mark VL variant. While it was not as formidable as the more advanced Panther, it still posed a significant threat capable of destroying a Sherman with a direct hit. Fortunately, against a Pershing tank, the odds were more favorable for the American vehicle, thanks to its superior armor and firepower. Nonetheless, the German tank found itself in a strategically advantageous position. It was well covered by its surroundings, with enough protection to make it hazardous for the Pershing to approach. Meanwhile, Eagle 7's tank sat exposed and vulnerable in the middle of the street, unable to find cover quickly enough. The German Panzer IV, sensing the threat, began to retreat, gradually backing into a safer, more concealed position behind the crumbled remains of the building. From Smooyer's vantage point, only the frontal part of the enemy's position was visible, leaving him unable to get a clean shot at the tank itself. The Panzer vanished completely behind the wreckage, disappearing from view amid the rubble and debris. McVeigh, in the Pershing, attempted to reposition his tank to gain a better angle of fire, but the narrow street severely limited his movement options. The building that served as cover for the German tank was a four-story residential structure, its front facade heavily damaged and partially collapsed, leaving only the rear portion still standing upright. Through gaps in the debris, Smooyer could see the interior walls beyond which the Panzer was concealed. It was clear that the German crew was adjusting its position inside the building, likely preparing to take another shot at the American tank from an improved angle. Smooyer made a decisive choice. Although he couldn't see the German Panzer directly, he could clearly see the standing sections of the building. Carefully, he rotated the turret, aiming his 65mm gun at the base of a remaining wall segment. precisely where he believed the structural weakness was located. The gun's high explosive shell, designed for demolitions and destruction of fortifications, was loaded and ready to fire. His target was the corner support of the building, a critical point where the integrity of the wall was weakest. At precisely 14 hours, 34 minutes, and 48 seconds, he fired. The shell sped toward the target and detonated against the brick and concrete, unleashing a powerful blast that obliterated a section of the corner support, roughly 6 feet wide. For a brief moment, nothing seemed to happen, and the battlefield fell eerily silent. Then, the laws of physics took over and the destruction became inevitable. Without the stabilizing support, the entire segment of the wall lost its hold. In an instant, 4 stories of masonry, reinforced with wooden beams, began to give way. The structure crumbled inward in a dramatic cascade of dust, debris, and fragments of brick and concrete. The collapse was thunderous, reverberating down the street and shaking the ground beneath. Tons of rubble followed, rapidly filling the space where the Panzer IV had been concealed. Dust clouds billowed outward, obscuring visibility and turning the street into a swirling fog of debris that lasted several seconds. When the dust settled, the building was completely gone, reduced to a mountain of shattered stone, twisted metal, and broken timber, all piled haphazardly in the street. Somewhere beneath that jumble of wreckage, the German Panzer IV was buried under tons of rubble. Inside the shattered tank, an 18-year-old machine gunner named Gustav Schaefer and his commander had only seconds to react before the crushing debris sealed them inside forever. Desperately, Schaefer and his commander fought their way through the enormous hatch at the top of the turret, clawing and scrambling over the debris-strewn interior. The rubble blocked access from most exits, and dust filled the air so densely that breathing became difficult. They pushed themselves forward, desperately trying to reach safety as the sounds of distant firing echoed through the destruction. Meanwhile, the other crew members of the Panzer IV remained trapped inside the fortress of wreckage. They were attempting to free themselves by means of their other hatches, fighting to emerge from the chaos before the collapsing building and debris completely sealed their fate. All the while, the relentless combat scene continued around them, a stark reminder of the brutal, unpredictable nature of warfare, where moments of hope were often balanced on the edge of disaster. Within a matter of mere minutes, all 4 members of the crew managed to escape from their compromised position. They quickly disappeared among the surrounding ruins, carefully navigating through the debris and the crumbling structures that had once stood as part of what was left of the city. Their hurried retreat was directed towards the outer edge of the desolated area, often referred to as the Rhind, a term used to describe the outer, more battered perimeter of the battleground. As the shadows lengthened and nightfall approached, these courageous individuals succeeded in crossing the nearby river, a natural barrier that had become a pivotal point in their escape route. Exhausted but alive, they finally surrendered themselves into the custody of American military police, an official step that marked the end of their frantic flight from danger. Meanwhile, the American forces continued to press forward, with Eagle 7, the aircraft they operated, maintaining its operational capabilities in Cologne for an additional 2 days, reinforcing their presence amid the chaos of a city under siege. By the time the calendar marked the 8th of March, the city had fallen completely into the hands of the advancing American troops, who had systematically gained control over its key strategic points. During this process, engineers acted swiftly to safeguard critical infrastructure. They secured the Henzelen Bridge before German demolition teams could set off explosives to destroy it, thus preserving an essential crossing. However, it was a sobering reality that many other bridges spanning the Rhine River had already been obliterated, shattered by explosives in a scorched earth tactic designed to slow or impede the enemy's advance. The historic Cathedral, an emblem of Gothic architecture and cultural heritage, remained standing amid the devastation. This ancient monument, with its soaring spires and intricate stonework, rose defiantly above the ruined surroundings, symbolizing resilience amidst destruction. Within just a week, footage captured by Bates of the intense engagement involving a Panther tank reached the hands of newsreel editors, who recognized its powerful potential to inform and motivate the public. This compelling film, showing scenes from the battlefield, was swiftly processed and made available to the American audience, eventually screening in movie theaters across the country by the end of March. Among the viewers was Smouyer's sister, who saw her brother actively participating in the combat footage at a local cinema in Pennsylvania. Her recognition of her sibling in the grainy footage prompted her to bring their parents to the same screening the very next day, allowing the entire family to witness firsthand the sacrifices and bravery displayed on the front lines. Meanwhile, the 3rd Armored Division refused to pause their relentless push into enemy territory. By the 10th of March, they had begun advancing eastward, crossing beyond the Rhine River and delving deeper into the heart of Germany. The resistance they encountered was inconsistent. Some towns and villages capitulated without putting up a fight, their defenses overwhelmed or surrendered out of fear. In contrast, other locations required intense, systematic house-to-house clearance, as defenders fought desperately to hold their ground. The disintegration of the Wehrmacht was becoming increasingly evident, with most units collapsing under the pressure. Yet, a handful of isolated remnants persisted, still following their orders to resist. Armed fanatics, including members of the SS and Hitler Youth, fought with suicidal determination, even throwing themselves into the line of fire against American tanks armed with Panzerfaust rockets. On the 30th of March, tragedy struck the division's leadership. Major General Maurice Rose, a highly respected officer, was leading a column south of Paderborn, riding at the very front of his forces. His leadership style remained unchanged, steadfast, and fearless, as he continued to lead from the front, refusing to command from the safety of a rear headquarters. At approximately 7 o'clock in the evening, his jeep suddenly encountered a German tank force that had managed to break through American lines. The road ahead was blocked by a formation of Tiger tanks, heavily armored and formidable. Despite attempts to evade, Rose's vehicle was cut off by a commanding Tiger tank that emerged directly in their path. From the turret hatch, a German soldier emerged armed with a machine pistol, pointing it directly at the fleeing jeep. Rose, responding instinctively, reached toward his holster, either to surrender his weapon or to prepare to resist. Tragically, the German soldier fired first, hitting Rose multiple times. The general was killed almost instantly, his death marking the loss of the highest-ranking American officer killed by enemy fire in all of Europe during the war. His body was recovered the following day by units from the 3rd Armored Division, with Smouyer's team actively participating in the recovery mission. The death of Major General Maurice Rose had a profound and somber effect on the entire division. Soldiers who had served under his command since the North African campaigns grappled with their grief, recognizing that they had lost not only a distinguished leader, but also a figure they deeply respected. Rose had been known for his demanding standards, yet he was undeniably fair and had always shared the risks faced by his men. His sense of duty and courage inspired those around him, and his personal sacrifice underscored the brutal reality of war. A funeral service was held in his honor at the Netherlands American Cemetery in the town of Margate. Thousands of mourners, including soldiers, officers, and civilians, gathered to pay their respects, underscoring the impact of his loss on both the battlefield and the American community back home. The fighting on the European front persisted unabated. The 3rd Armored Division continued its eastward advance through April, swiftly encountering pockets of what remained of German resistance. These fierce pockets, while stubborn, generally crumbled rapidly once engaged, allowing the American forces to make steady progress. By the late days of April, the German military forces had effectively disintegrated on a large scale, with many units surrendering en masse, an indication that the German Wehrmacht, the formidable armed forces of Nazi Germany, had ceased to function as an organized fighting force. The culmination of these events came on May the 7th, when Germany unconditionally surrendered to the Allied forces, ending the war in Europe. The following day, the 8th of May, was officially declared Victory in Europe Day, a historic milestone celebrated across the continent and the world. In the aftermath of victory, Smooyer and his unit remained in Germany through the summer months, participating as part of the occupation force tasked with stabilizing and overseeing the region's transition from wartime devastation to a fragile peace. The aircraft Eagle 7 was eventually transported back to the United States, where it was displayed and studied as an important artifact of the war effort, serving as a symbol of their dedication, bravery, and the hard-fought victory that had been achieved after years of relentless conflict. The Ordnance Department, tasked with assessing and evaluating the battlefield resilience of Pershing's combat vehicle, embarked on a meticulous examination of every aspect of the tank's post-battle condition. Their objective was to gain a detailed understanding of how the vehicle performed under combat stress, to identify any weaknesses, and to document the extent of damage sustained during the engagement. Consequently, engineers painstakingly recorded and logged every minor detail: a scratch in the paint, a dent in the armor, no matter how seemingly insignificant. Each mark told a story of the fierce skirmish, each sign of where unveils the relentless punishment the machine endured. Simultaneously, ballistic experts dedicated their efforts to measuring and analyzing the wear and deformation of the gun barrel. Their precise measurements aimed to determine the extent of barrel erosion, which directly affected a weapon's accuracy and firing effectiveness. Mechanical crews, skilled in the art of maintenance, inspected the tank's various components, noting mechanical issues that might have hindered performance or hinted at underlying vulnerabilities. This comprehensive record-keeping formed a vital part of post-battle assessments, ensuring that every detail was captured to inform future repairs and design improvements. By the time September of the year 1945 arrived, the military orders to cease active combat activities and to begin logistical withdrawals took precedence. Corporal Clarence Smooyer, having served and fought through the tumult of war, received official instructions to return to the United States. He prepared himself for the journey home, boarding a troop transport vessel that would carry him from the port of Bremerhaven across the Atlantic Ocean. The voyage lasted precisely 8 days, a period that allowed time for reflection on the battles fought, the comrades lost, and the memories crafted in the crucible of war. Upon reaching American shores, Smooyer disembarked at Fort Dix, located in New Jersey, where he was processed and formally discharged from active duty. The process of reintegration was quick. Within a week, he was handed his discharge papers, officially ending his military service. He was now a civilian once more. On the 24th day of September, 1945, Corporal Clarence Smooyer, registered under the service number 334,900,086, was officially released from his obligations to the United States Army. Returning to Pennsylvania, he sought out the familiar streets of Lehighton, a quiet town where his parents still resided. People who remembered him as a gentle, reserved boy, someone who had never harbored a desire for violence or confrontation. The homecoming was comforting and familiar. The countryside and community served as a stark contrast to the chaos of war. He settled into a modest but steady life, finding employment at a local cement plant, where he worked diligently, forging a new path in the aftermath of conflict. In the year 1946, Clarence married Melba Whitehead, a union that brought stability and warmth to his life. Over the following years, they were blessed with 3 children, nourishing the bonds of family and love. Yet, though outwardly he appeared to adapt and heal, inside, the echoes of those war-torn days lingered. He rarely spoke about his wartime experiences, preferring instead to focus on his family and work. Nonetheless, the war had left an indelible mark on him, an unseen burden that refused to fully lift. Night after night, his sleep was haunted by vivid, unsettling dreams that transported him back to the battlefield. He saw the city of Cologne, with its majestic cathedral spires piercing the smoky skies, a sight both awe-inspiring and ominous. He remembered the fiery destruction of the Panther tank blazing in a town square, the flames flickering violently as chaos erupted around it. His mind conjured images of a black automobile, racing recklessly through an intersection, caught in a crossfire of American and German gunfire, a scene that seemed to tear itself from the pages of a nightmare. In this recurring vision, a woman seemed to have been thrown from the passenger side of the automobile, a figure falling rapidly onto cold cobblestones, her body seemingly lifeless or severely injured. This haunting image imprinted itself on Clarence's memory and remained with him for nearly 7 decades. For as long as he could remember, he carried the heavy weight of that moment. The unknown woman, the vehicle, the gunfire, and a devastating realization that he had been the one to pull the trigger. He did not know her name, nor did he know whether his bullets had killed her or if the flames of the German tanks had ended her life. All he knew was that she was dead, and that the shot, or perhaps the chaos of the battle, had sealed her fate with his hand. His wife Melba soon perceived the signs of his distress. The nightmares disturbed his sleep, and he would often awaken suddenly in the dead of night, fists clenched, swinging violently at enemies only he could see. The memories surged so intensely and so vividly that time seemed to collapse. Decades felt like mere days, as if the horrors of the past lived on in his subconscious and refused to fade away. Over the years, Smooyer endured additional tragedies that compounded his suffering. His son Barry, the youngest of his 3 children, tragically died in the 1970s from a heroin overdose, a loss that devastated the family and added to Clarence's ongoing pain. His wife, Melba, developed Alzheimer's disease later in her life, a cruel illness that gradually robbed her of her memories and, ultimately, of her recognition of him. After a marriage lasting over 71 years, Melba passed away in the year 2017, leaving Clarence widowed once again. The circle of people who had anchored Clarence's civilian life, his parents, wife, and son, had all departed, leaving him alone with the enduring shadow of war. The emotional and psychological scars persisted, unhealed, a reminder of the turbulence he had endured. Despite the passage of many years, the war remained an inescapable presence in his mind, an indelible chapter of his life that refused to fade into obscurity. It was not until the year 1996, when Clarence was 73 years old, that he first saw footage of Cologne during that fateful battle. The film was made by Jim Bates, a documentary filmmaker who captured scenes of the city and its destruction as part of a broader documentary about the 3rd Armored Division's campaigns during the war. The footage included the renowned Cathedral Duel, a significant and widely recognized event, but within the scenes narrated or shown in passing, there was something more profound, a detail Clarence had never truly seen clearly before. The black automobile, the machine gun fire, and the tragic figure falling from the passenger seat. A young woman, lifeless, the victim of violence he now understood he had helped to cause. This revelation was devastating. For 50 years, Clarence had believed he had merely been caught in the chaos of the battle. But now he faced the truth. He had, indeed, killed a civilian. The realization crushed him under an overwhelming wave of guilt and remorse. Yet, even in its crushing weight, this knowledge kindled a desperate desire within him, to find resolution, to understand, and perhaps to find a fragment of peace. He yearned to know her story, to discover her name, to apologize to her family, or at least to seek their forgiveness, though he doubted he merited such grace. Nearly 2 decades later, in 2013, Clarence revisited Cologne once more. Now 89 years old, he traveled back to the city where he had fought so many years earlier. A German journalist, who had taken an interest in the story of that tragic incident, managed to identify the woman in the footage. Her name was Katharina Esser, and she was only 26 years old when her life tragically ended. She was the youngest of 4 sisters. During her lifetime, Katharina had cared for her aging parents and supported her family, even as her sisters married and began families of their own. She worked diligently as a clerk in a local grocery store and also attended night classes in home economics, striving to better herself and her circumstances amid a challenging life. This act of uncovering her identity provided a bittersweet closure to Clarence's decades-long quest. It humanized the anonymous victim and transformed her from a nameless figure in a haunting memory into a real person, a young woman with a family, hopes, dreams, and a life cut short far too early. Through this discovery, Clarence found a measure of peace, understanding that her story had finally come to light. On the 6th day of March in the year 1945, amidst the chaos and devastation of wartime, she and her commanding officer embarked on a desperate attempt to escape the war-torn city that had become their prison. Their plan was born out of a fragile hope for safety, but as they moved through the battered streets, the dangers of their environment caught up with them. In the midst of their flight, they found themselves caught in the violent crossfire of battle, a confusing, deadly exchange of gunfire that neither could fully control or predict. Their escape was thwarted, and both were left to grapple with the aftermath of that harrowing day, knowing that the conflict had left its mark on their lives forever. Later, in a moment of quiet reflection and shared remorse, a journalist arranged to meet at the grave of Esser, a woman whose life had been cut short amid the violence. The meeting took place in a somber cemetery, at the resting place of Katrina Esser. Smooyer, one of the men involved and burdened by guilt, arrived expecting to confront only his own inner demons and loneliness. Instead, he was surprised to find Gustav Schaefer, a German gunner whose Panzer IV tank had been part of the same chaos, who had also fired shots that day, and who had been buried beneath rubble when the building Smooyer had caused to collapse had fallen on him. Both men, now in their late 30s, approximately 18 years older than they had been in the year of the conflict, stood side by side, both haunted by the same haunting memory. Their shared memories created a bridge of understanding. Both believed, with uncertain certainty, that they had been responsible for her death. She was caught between them in that moment, neither knowing for sure whose bullet had ended her life. Perhaps both had, or possibly neither. The fog of urban combat rendered certainty impossible. The chaos of war had blurred the lines of accountability. What mattered more than the precise details was the undeniable fact that both of them had pulled the triggers on that day, that they shared responsibility, and that they carried personal guilt for what had happened. In a gesture of respect, and perhaps seeking some form of reconciliation, Schaefer laid down a small bouquet of yellow roses atop her grave. Smooyer, moved by the moment, knelt to do the same. However, in his emotional agitation, he stumbled and lost his footing. Schaefer, quick and steady, reached out and caught him before he fell, an act of kindness bridging the chasm of decades and memories. The two men, once enemies on opposite sides of a brutal conflict, now found themselves united in grief and understanding in front of a resting place. Over time, they forged an unlikely friendship rooted in shared pain and mutual acknowledgement. Communications flowed across the Atlantic Ocean, with handwritten letters crossing from Pennsylvania to Germany and video calls bringing them face to face despite the miles between. During these exchanges, they discussed the horrors of war, not as adversaries, but as men who had survived under circumstances beyond their control, trying to comprehend and accept what they had endured. Schaefer passed away in the year 2017. Following his death, Smooyer sent a bouquet of flowers to Schaefer's funeral, accompanied by a heartfelt note. "I will never forget you, your brother-in-arms, Clarence." On the 18th day of September in the year 2019, Clarence Smooyer was awarded the Bronze Star Medal for Valor, a recognition of his bravery during combat, at a formal ceremony held in Washington, D.C. He was then 95 years old, the last surviving member of the crew of Eagle 7, a crew whose history had captured the imagination of many. The other members of that crew received their medals posthumously, with their families accepting the honors on their behalf, ensuring that their sacrifices and actions were remembered and honored. Smooyer himself passed away on the 30th day of September in the year 2022, in his home in Allentown, Pennsylvania, having lived nearly an entire century, exactly 99 years, marked by memories of war, reconciliation, and enduring friendships. Since the year 2013, every 6th day of March has been marked by a silent homage. Yellow roses appear annually on Katrina Esser's grave in Cologne, serving as a quiet acknowledgement that she is remembered. Somewhere, someone still carries the memory of her, perhaps quietly whispering apologies for the loss. The old photographs show a Panther tank parked in front of Cologne Cathedral, engulfed in flames, a haunting image from a brutal past. Today, that same Panther sits displayed in the National Armor and Cavalry Museum, preserved as a testament to history. Original film footage from that era still exists. A brief, impactful snippet lasting only 45 seconds that profoundly changed America's understanding of armored warfare. Yet this story is not simply about tanks or warfare alone. At its core, it's about the human beings involved in the brutal machinery of war. Men ordered to kill, men haunted by their actions, and men striving for peace long after the guns have fallen silent. These are stories of ordinary people caught in extraordinary circumstances, stories about heroism, guilt, and ultimately, redemption. It is about those who fought not because they wanted to, but because duty forced their hand, and about how, through understanding and compassion, they sought to find peace with what they had done. If this story touched your heart or resonated with your own sense of empathy, I invite you to do me a favor. Clicking that like button sends a signal to platforms like YouTube, encouraging this story to reach more people who need to hear it. Every single acknowledgement matters, as it helps preserve these memories from obscurity. Consider subscribing and turning on notifications as we dedicate ourselves daily to unearthing and sharing stories long forgotten. Stories about tank gunners who never wanted to fight, yet became extraordinary in their service, about real individuals who exhibited courage, faced guilt head-on, and found their way toward redemption. Please feel free to leave a comment below, share where you are watching from, or reflect on what this story means to you. Every piece of feedback helps to keep these stories alive and relevant, reminding us of our collective human history, a history woven with bravery, remorse, and hope. If you're tuning in from the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, or any other part of the globe, it's important to recognize that our community extends far beyond national borders. It reaches across the entire world. You are not merely an observer or viewer in this collective. Instead, you are an active participant in preserving and honoring the memories of remarkable individuals whose stories have touched us all. Your presence here contributes significantly to ensuring that these histories are not lost to time, that they continue to resonate across generations. Please take a moment to share your location with us, so we can better understand the diverse origins of our audience and appreciate the global span of those who are connected through these stories. If any member of your family or your ancestors have served in the military, lived through significant historical events, or played a noteworthy role in their community, we encourage you to tell us about it. Your voice and memories help to create a richer, more connected narrative that celebrates their contributions and sacrifices. Simply letting us know that you are present here, engaged and attentive, is a valuable contribution to this effort. Your acknowledgement affirms that these stories matter, that the legacies of people like Clarence Smooyer and Katharina Esser are not to be forgotten or silenced. You are actively participating in a movement that keeps their names alive, ensuring they are remembered with dignity and respect for the lives they led and the impact they made. We are deeply grateful for your watchfulness and attention. Your involvement helps guarantee that their histories do not fade into silence or obscurity, but instead continue to inspire and educate. These individuals, whose lives we hold in remembrance, truly deserve to have their stories told and retold. Thanks to your commitment, these memories are being preserved and honored, making sure that their importance and their humanity remain part of our shared history.